今年武汉疫情严重，这么多都是招聘辅警的，这么多全部都是招考辅警的。我的天哪！妈，来看这猴子，哇，多恶心啊！
上哪儿去了？我一直在你后面跟着呢。那你上哪儿去？你给我，咱俩去拿去找去。走吧。你先看你包里有没有，你兜里有没有？牛肉没拿，绝对有。你最后回来的时候给我拿了一块牛肉。要报警。牛肉拿出来，牛肉拿出来。牛肉还有块牛肉呢，还有块牛。衣服敞开，在哪儿夹着呢？你咋不吃了呢？
嗰啲入晒去先啦，嗰啲。
臭腳啦喂，咪撚喐手啊！你諗住我電視有乜撚嘢用啊？影響晒你班戇鳩仔啊！呢啲冇得出嘅，冇得出。
咁我見到咧，就係有商鋪咧，係已經係閂到門。
嗱，咁啊，佢對面拉咗個橙帶，咁即係咩意思咧？
唔俾過馬路。
咁如果我落，
但係
咁我哋睇下呢位人士啦。
啊，你過啊，你過啊。
嗱，我哋睇下佢所謂嘅封鎖線啊。
哦，重擊封鎖線。
封鎖線。
點解重擊封鎖線？
啦，鬼佬乘機衝擊封鎖線係冇人理嘅。你做越南人咧，就一定就係鬼佬。
发通报的这个主要的作用就是给所有的单位都敲响一个警钟，虽然疫情防控现在已经进入常态化，但是还是要紧抓这些防控措施。
We know from our skies the American hardware we trust and depend upon for our defence. What is less well known is how much Americans trust and depend on Australian excellence.
What Austal does is we really build the Ferraris of the ocean. Now, these are high-speed vessels. They're highly optimised, highly engineered for speed and for comfort. And I think one of the real areas that we're focused on as a company is the unmanned autonomous ship programs in the US.
But the real problem is this. We are fighting not one but two viruses. Well, yes, the coronavirus, but also the socialist virus. But we now need to find a cure. And if we don't find a cure, we will have one of two outcomes. One will be more socialism, which is a bit like trying to cure a stomach ulcer with sulfuric acid. Or two, we'll have some free enterprise. And if we can have some free enterprise now, if we can loosen up so that we can see that the costs of production are lessened, so that we go back to having some coal-fired power, which is cheap, we've got the resources, we can do it, so that we can in fact compete, then we can pull away from China and their slave labour cheap goods, and we can start to be more self-reliant and more self-sufficient as a nation.
Despite backlash from the international community, the Chinese parliament approved the new national security law on Hong Kong, a move seen as putting Hong Kong further under Beijing's control. On Thursday, China's National People's Congress voted and passed a draft resolution. According to Chinese media, in a matter of weeks, the law will be drafted in detail and enacted. With the new law, Beijing aims to prevent and punish what it sees as subversion, terrorism, and separatism, as well as any foreign interference. But the law has been criticized internationally as eroding Hong Kong's freedoms.
India's army on patrol in the territory of Ladakh along the country's border with China. The nuclear-armed neighbours dispute a 3,500-kilometre frontier in the remote Himalayas. Earlier this month, soldiers clashed in a number of areas around the unofficial border known as the Line of Actual Control, or LAC.
Is Hong Kong loses its special trading status, which, if you really think about it, is almost like shooting Hong Kong in the foot. Your thoughts on that?
Definitely. This is also useless for the Chinese, because the Chinese, if they want to impose the national security law, they are prepared to kill the golden egg, the goose who lay the golden egg. They give up Hong Kong already. I think they've given up Hong Kong. Yeah, I think the most effective sanction President Donald Trump can impose on China, at least at the initial stage, is to freeze the bank account of the Chinese top officials corrupt money in the U.S. and in the free world.
Answer, but then what's the next step? Because the president is still trying to do business with China. He wants a phase 2 of the trade deal and all of that. There's now talk maybe there'll be U.S. trade restrictions on exports from Hong Kong, like we've seen from the mainland. What do you think are some of the next steps?
Well, first of all, the withdrawal of the sanctions exemptions for Hong Kong. Tariffs will be put on Hong Kong. Maybe there will be global Magnitsky-type sanctions on Chinese and Hong Kong officials. Mm-hmm. And Jimmy Lai, who runs the only pro-democracy newspaper in Hong Kong, told Maria Bartiromo on Tuesday that he'd like to see the confiscation of assets of those officials. I think that's probably a good thing.
We're at war with the most sophisticated enemy. We have an information economic war right now. They have a firewall that's financed by American capital and by American technology, and then they have the many operations they have with the Uyghurs. But they are the surveillance state, China. You talk about, use this concept of the surveillance state when you talk about America. What do you mean by that?
I am concerned that increasingly in our country, some of the, elements of our government are so concerned about the populist uprising that we see led by President Trump that they're trying to gather information on Americans. And I think that we can improve those conditions by improving the FISA process, but then also by remaining diligent in our oversight. I got to, Steve, though, transition to what's going on Twitter right now, because it goes to the very nature of truth, right? I mean, you guys have been telling the truth on this podcast since before it was a fashionable or popular thing to understand that America could one day go into lockdown. And so getting the raw, accurate information in front of people is so critically important. It's why the president uses these social media platforms so as to not have a filter from the media.
Yeah, he disintermediated mainstream media and big media by using Twitter, going over their heads.
Right, and allowed these clear messages to get through that were so powerful that they could not be stopped by almost every establishment force in the country. Now we see that they are fighting back. And Twitter in particular is engaged in election interference in this country. You'll remember that Twitter shadow banned 4 members of Congress during the Russia hoax: Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, and Devin Nunes.
That was just random.
And by the way,
random guys.
Like, they got caught by Vice. Like, they didn't get caught by one of ours. They got caught by a left-leaning news entity, and they said that was just a bug in the system that caught those 4 members of Congress only. Right? So they are putting their thumb on the scale, and the notion that they would outsource the fact-checking system to the people that have been factually wrong about just about everything since before the 2016 election is an insult to the readers and users of their platform. And we ought to go and file Federal Election Commission complaints against Twitter, because what they are doing is an in-kind contribution to the Joe Biden campaign, to the DNC, when they suppress and editorialize on the president's comments. The other thing we need to do is reform Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. A lot of listeners will not know that Twitter, Facebook enjoy privileges against lawsuits that this podcast does not enjoy, that your local newspaper does not enjoy, that CNN and Fox News do not enjoy. And they get those because purportedly they are supposed to be unbiased, neutral platforms. But that's inaccurate.
Okay, I want to go to 230 and then you jump in. By the way, Zero Hedge is still banned by Twitter. We were taken down for 2 days because of its comments about the Chinese Communist Party and about the virus. Zero Hedge, which I think
I only got you fined by the FCC. I didn't get you in Twitter jail.
So hold it. So go back to 230. What is it? Why do they have it? Is it because they've got every lobbyist in town? The audience should understand every law firm, every lobbyist is signed up by these guys so people can't fight against them. They got the biggest lobbyist armies around, these big tech companies.
Absolutely. And I've got a great segment on big tech and the fusion that they have with the CCP in China on Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz that I hope people subscribe to.
Which, by the way, you are 85 spots ahead of Joe Biden. So that's pretty impressive.
Wow. See,
because the Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz is not a proof of life podcast. That's where you actually get some information.
That's right. But what we're talking about is the extent to which these U.S. technology companies are not putting our country and our people first. They're actually working with China. A lot of in Xinjiang province, where you see some of the worst human rights abuses, you see companies like Amazon, like Norton, these U.S. companies that are doing the back-end authentication and web services and email services for the CCP, and they are American companies. Would we have allowed American companies to go do work for Hitler's Nazi Germany, for Russia during the Cold War? But yet we allow these American companies to go and build out the back end for China, and we act like that is not an America last thing.
How did they get this Section 230, and what privileges do they get that you don't get on your podcast and we don't get here?
Yeah, if we defame someone, if we slander someone's character, we're going to get sued for that here. But Twitter and Facebook and other digital platforms, they have this special carve-out in the law, Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, that says, well, because they're not editorializing, because they're not contributing to the conversation itself, they're merely hosts of the conversation, that they do not get that liability. And that has allowed them to really
That's so laughable.
It's so laughable, but it allows them to squeeze out of the marketplace a lot of the local newspapers and a lot of the places where some of us go for less biased information. Raheem?
就是今天，就在我们6·4啊，这个最后一个纪念日，也是我们的新中国即将诞生之日啊。庞皮奥国务卿以及美国的我们的灭共啊，他们称为6大干将，实际上我们是60大干将，61个人，61个大干将啊，做出了这大的决定。这可以说是真正的美国和世界，我们的以美灭共啊，以美灭共，把战场拉向国际的第一次这个最重要的事情。庞皮奥国务卿在6月4号以前给了我们个最大的礼物啊！这在3年前我在华盛顿说的时候，都是说我是傻叉啊，绝不可能疯了。甚至在6个月以前，我和班农先生开会的时候，还吵得一塌糊涂啊！在华盛顿啊，我们这个签公关公司的时候，他说：“郭先生，你这个就是全世界最危险的啊，几乎零回报的投资。但是我们一定会做啊。”战友们，没有庞皮奥国务卿绝对做不到，他的压力太大了，你们不知道他压力有多大啊！就像我昨天和前天这在视频中说的，就是在几天前在华盛顿还爆吵呢啊！这个战友们，所以说这个时候大家一定要拜托了啊！大家一定要拜托了，如果你们是爆料革命战友，真正的反共的话，真正的有信心灭共的话，到庞皮奥国务卿啊，到他的推特下面对他表示感谢。我呼吁全香港、全世界的华人和中国人有良知的，到庞皮奥国务卿推特下面，就是用双手，就是那个感谢，就别说多了，感谢啊，感谢 ，I love you， 感谢你，庞皮奥，拯救中国，拯救香港 ，My hero， 就这就行了。